It's a long way from slap-out Alabama to the concrete corridors of Washington, D.C. But for Larry McCord, his wife Ramona, and their 3 children, this has been a week they'll never forget. Today, First Lady Nancy Reagan honored Larry and his family as one of the 9 great American families, so honored for quietly dedicating their lives to serving others. It would be hard to find a family more involved in good works than the McCords. Larry is chief of the local volunteer fire department. Ramona heads up several farm organizations, and together they sponsored a county fair for young farmers when government funds were cut. It's an exhausting regimen, but the McCords wouldn't live their lives any other way.
What we do, if we out in the middle of the field and the siren goes off, and if we got emergency, we quit what we're doing and run. And I mean, everybody, sometime in their lives, got extra time they could give to help others.
It takes teamwork to do what we do, and it's long hours, even though we don't realize the hours have gone by because we put all our efforts into doing everything that we can to help others.
Larry says he kind of enjoyed all the attention he received this week, but admits his mind was really on his farm and his 115 cows out in the field. He says he can hardly wait to get back to that and all the other work he and his family are really comfortable with. Peter Quinn-Hackis, WSFA TV News, Washington.
Troy State University and Tuskegee Institute are located only 60 miles apart, but the two have never gotten together before on the football field. Well, this athletic oversight has now been corrected. The Trojans and Golden Tigers are beginning what many will hope to be a traditional football rivalry this fall right here in Montgomery. The official announcement was made at this Montgomery news conference this afternoon. For the next 2 years, and what many hope will be years to come, Troy State and Tuskegee will kick off their season in Crampton Bowl in what will be known as the Pepsi Challenge Bowl, with this nice trophy going to the winner. Plans for a series between the schools have actually been in the making for quite some time, but scheduling conflicts, conference tie-ups, and several other reasons have prevented a gridiron matchup. But now it's official, and all involved are excited, especially the athletic directors who look at this game as a potential big money maker.
We think it has the potential of being the all-time gate for both Troy and Tuskegee.
The rivalry we have between Alabama State is healthy. It's good, and if we can develop that type of rivalry between Troy and Tuskegee, nothing better. I'd love it.
This year's game will be played Labor Day weekend, Saturday afternoon, September the 3rd at 1:30. Tickets for the first ever Pepsi Challenge Bowl will be going on sale soon. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
The people who were there tonight felt that there is a tendency on the part of the police department to stereotype residents of housing projects. And of course they felt that if nothing else were done, they felt that that needs to be worked on and improved, that all the residents of housing projects are not people who, commit crimes and so forth.
Well, a couple of marathons are going on in the state legislature. The Alabama Senate is now well past the 24-hour mark in the filibuster over a bill that would change the way damages are awarded in negligence cases. Reporter Dennis Latham has been watching the filibuster throughout the day. Dennis?
Bob, all this extended debate, that's what some senators like to call it, is designed to delay and eventually prevent a vote on the so-called comparative negligence bill. The bill would allow damages to be awarded in negligence cases based on the degree of fault. Under current Alabama law, a person is barred from receiving damages from another person if the one suing is in any way at fault. Proponents of the bill say the new law would correct this, but opponents, like the senators filibustering, say the bill would mean a 47% increase in insurance premiums. It's for this reason about a dozen senators have been talking almost 26 hours. The filibustering senators are prepared to try and speak to the bill until midnight, when the Senate should automatically adjourn until 10 o'clock Thursday morning. One of the filibustering senators, Larry Dixon of Montgomery, says they're willing to continue the debate until August 1st, the last day of this session. But what Senator Dixon and the others are no doubt counting on is an agreement with supporters of the bill to carry it over to the end of the session when its passage is much more difficult. The filibustering senators are hoping that pressure to pass the budgets, the crime bills, and the governor's tax measures will force this agreement. And Bob, only time will tell. The House of Representatives is now in session, and they're facing a pretty tough battle tonight, too. Chris Grimshaw tells us about that.
Bob, the battle that they're taking up this evening involves the cogeneration bill, is what it's called, and cogeneration is a bill that deals with electricity and, more importantly, the right for private industrial groups to generate their own electricity. And even more crucial than that, the right for those private industrial groups that create their own electricity to force the major utilities, like Alabama Power Company, to buy any leftover extra electricity. The power company officials are saying that this would create a situation where they would be forced to buy extra electricity from these private industrial groups at a price much higher than they could make it themselves. The governor's office is backing the bill, which was prompted when Scott Paper Company in Mobile said it was thinking about building its own power plant and expanding, but only if this bill passed. But the efforts are underway now to stop the cogeneration bill from coming up for a scheduled debate at 7 o'clock. Before the House went into session, or earlier today, the state employees made some major gains as two of their key legislative goals came out of a House committee. One of the two bills would allow state employees to participate and take part in campaigns, and the other bill would give them representation on the state personnel board.
Political freedom bill would be definitely a milestone, and we have been supporting the personnel board bill for several years, and so if it's passage, I think both of them would be milestones, yes.
Both bills are Senate bills, and coming out of a House committee, that means they now only need approval by the full House before going to the governor for signature, who, as Mr. Smith says, could play a big part in their success.
Well, I think that the governor is well respected in the House and carries a lot of weight, so we're sure that his help will help us get these bills passed by the House.
But it will be Thursday before those two state employee bills could surface in the House, but the major issue of today is cogeneration. Bob?
Okay, Chris, looks like perhaps we're in for another all-night session down at the Capitol tonight.
Bob, the situation down here in the House looks like they could be here for quite some time, and as Dennis said, it looks like the senators against the bill that is tying up the Senate right now, they're all quite set on their ways, and so it could be a long fight this evening.
Okay, thanks very much. Chris Grimshaw and Dennis Latham live at the Capitol. Meanwhile, Governor George...
At 4:17 a.m., investigators S.W. Ingram and D.G. Shaner spotted a suspect walking south on Court Street. He then turned into the parking lot there in between Sears and Lanier. The investigators went to the west side of Sears hoping to stop the suspect and question him. And at that time, they discovered that they were on one side of the fence and he was on the other. Officer Ingram got out of the car and confronted the suspect, identified himself, and I might note that Officer Ingram was in a full police uniform. He identified himself and asked the suspect to raise his hands in the air and come in his direction. The suspect then turned and dropped a pair of gloves he had in his hand and ran towards the west side of Lanier High School. Officer Ingram fired one shot with a shotgun and striking the suspect in the lower right leg, causing a minor flesh wound.
"49-year-old Cleveland Robinson worked and paid his Social Security for 30 years until it was diagnosed that he had lung cancer. That was in 1978. Robinson began receiving disability benefits after treatment started and doctors said he was unable to work. The Prattville resident received a monthly Social Security check of $735 a month. Until late last year, he found himself among the more than 350,000 disability recipients called in by the agency for review to determine if Robinson was still eligible to work. He says he's done everything he's been asked to do by Social Security, but that doesn't seem to be enough.
It's very frustrating, and I can't sleep at night thinking about it. I don't have any way of making I don't have any other income, and it seemed like to me that they're just throwing me out to the dogs after working 30 years and paying the maximum Social Security.
His doctor, Montgomery Hiley, says Cleveland Robinson is too ill to work, and he's told the Social Security agency that on several occasions.
Mr. Robinson has a tumor of the left lung that was diagnosed in 1978 by biopsy at MD Anderson. It was not removed. It was treated with X-ray. It has enlarged, and we have evidence that it spread to the liver, which Social Security has been informed of, and they continue to deny the tumor's there, number one, and to deny it's enlarged, number two, and that it's spread, number three.
What do you think Social Security is doing this to Mr. Robinson?
I don't know whether it's a failure of communication on their part or whether they've singled him out.
Robinson's wife, Mary, says government doctors can't find tumors in her husband's lungs and kidneys.
It said his lungs were normal. And I would really like to know that they were, but they're not.
A spokesman for the Social Security Agency in Birmingham told us today no determination has been made in the case of Cleveland Robinson and that the case is still being reviewed. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Montgomery police say everything fit perfectly. A police unit was already staking out an area around Court Street when the call came in about a burglary suspect. They spotted a man who matched the detailed description walking south on Court Street.
Officer Ingram got out of the car and confronted the suspect, identified himself, and I might note that Officer Ingram was in a full police uniform. He identified himself and asked the suspect to raise his hands in the air and come in his direction. The suspect then turned and dropped a pair of gloves he had in his hand and ran towards the west side of Lanier High School. Officer Ingram fired one shot with a shotgun and striking the suspect in the lower right leg, causing a minor flesh wound.
Captain Wilson says the suspect had a knife but dropped it before he ran. He's now in custody, charged with the crime.
Officers say the teenager is a suspect in a rash of burglaries and rapes that have occurred in the area during the past several months.
Police say the other break-ins have occurred in the Carter Hill Road, College, and Court Streets and Fairview Avenue areas. Most of the victims were black and white females in their 50s and 60s. Police are still investigating those burglaries and believe the teenager is connected to the others he hasn't confessed to. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Background, and I answered that very easily. Well, the minute the light turned, about 16 started its development under the... I would like to develop an international free trade zone here in Montgomery. It's been done before. We can do it. We would need your backing. We'd need your support. But I think it'd be wonderful if we would have our own custom operation here and a runway large enough to accommodate some of those heavier jets that could come in from overseas, bringing the kind of products and materials that I think we could use and need, our industry could use right here in Montgomery.
All the bill does is simply raise the drinking age from 19 to 21.
But it wasn't that simple for Representative Curtis Smith to sell the House on his bill. Debate lasted several hours before adjournment. If passed, the bill won't go into effect until October 15th of this year, and even then won't affect those who are 19 and 20 years old. The fight over the cogeneration bill was delayed last night so Scott Paper Company and Alabama Power Company officials could settle their differences, but things didn't work out that way.
However, this morning, negotiations broke off.
Backers of the Scott Paper bill felt they had the Wallace administration on their side, but after 2 hours of debate, another version of the cogeneration bill passed, a version that left Scott officials upset.
Were the House version of the bill to become law, not only would it fail to provide the incentives necessary for jobs and investment in Alabama, but that it goes exactly in the opposite direction.
Power Company officials say the bill that passed is fair and shows that Scott Paper Company only wanted a bill that would force the Power Company customers to pay for Scott's proposed power plant. But later, Paper Company officials say Governor Wallace is still working on their side.
He has also indicated that he supports all of the concepts behind our legislation. He recognizes that the version that passed the House is not satisfactory.
The bill now moves to the Senate. And the Montgomery County delegation was lost in a fight over a pay raise for the Montgomery County probate judge. Both factions of the local delegation agree the judge deserves a raise, but they still can't agree on how much of one. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
I'm just telling the truth.
Perhaps I should let them answer this, but my opinion is that they have a pretty constant. There is always a leaning to the low bidder who meets specifications for any purchase coming from this campus. We make every attempt to stretch our dollars just as far as they will go. We have too few of them, and you can be assured that the tendency is, not a tendency, we do award to the low bidder who meets specifications.
I believe in the folder that was sent you was a copy of the proposed contingent fee contract arrangement.
We got a little bit, just wait for you to show up. More activity going on.
You got your mask hooked up there.
Mr. Dow's recommendation.
All right, come move in a second.
Connie is a graduate of Jeff Davis High School.
Do we have 4 for this?
The Coosa River north of Wetumpka has been called by some people some of the best bass fishing water in the country. It's also great for canoe and kayak trips. At least, it used to be, until a few years ago when Alabama Power Company reopened the Walter Bolden Dam. That's when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says fishing and recreation here suddenly dropped off.
We believe that there's a tremendous decline in the fish population.
Both Bolden and Jordan dams feed off of Lake Martin. The Coosa runs out of Jordan Dam. When Bolden came back online, the amount of water flowing down the Coosa dropped. So now a study is underway by Alabama Power, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and the U.S. Interior Department to find out how much water is needed to bring the Coosa back to some semblance of its former self. It all sounds pretty simple until you start talking money, and that's what some people say this is really all about.
The Walter Bolden Dam, from what we've been told with Alabama Power Company, is a much more efficient dam and therefore generates power much more efficiently. And if you pour the same amount of water over there as opposed to here, you get a much greater return on your dollar. And therefore, there is a question of dollars out here.
In the past, there has been some pressure put on Alabama Power to increase the flow into the Coosa, but Alabama Power is currently meeting the minimum flow requirements as set by the state. Still, this testing could change those requirements and maybe bring more of the bass back to the Coosa. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. The Coosa flows south in Elmore County from Jordan Dam on the southern edge of Lake Jordan. This river has been called some of the best bass fishing water in the country, as well as providing a haven for canoers and other boaters. But no more. Ever since Alabama Power Company reopened Walter Bolden Dam, things on the Coosa just haven't been the same.
We believe that there's a tremendous decline in the fish population.
Bolden also feeds off of Lake Jordan, so when Bolden opened, it dropped the amount of water flowing through Jordan Dam down the Coosa. So now Alabama Power Company, the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and the U.S. Interior Department are studying the Coosa, trying to figure out how much water flow is needed to bring it back to something like it was.
The Walter Bolden Dam, from what we've been told with Alabama Power Company, is a much more efficient dam and therefore generates power much more efficiently. And if you pour the same amount of water over there as opposed to here, you get a much greater return on your dollar. And therefore, there is a question of dollars out here.
The power company is currently meeting minimum flow requirements as set by the state. This study, however, could change those requirements, but it may not come easy. Federal workers say there's a big difference between deciding what should be done and doing it. Ultimately, if anyone's unhappy with any new requirements, it could end up in court. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
A basketball player that's 6'4" is not that unusual at all. In fact, the average height of a round ball player in college approaches or exceeds that level. But when you're 6'4", wear a size 15 shoe, and play basketball like this, then you draw special attention, especially when you're only 12 years old.
I think the young man going into the 7th grade, he's got a tremendous self-concept. His coordination is good. He's going to be a strong kid. I think he's going to be a tremendous basketball player before he's through playing this game.
Coach Swears is talking about Bay Minette's Quentin Higgins. It seems everybody at this week's AUM basketball camp is buzzing about the player nicknamed Little Ralph, for obvious reasons. His favorite players are Ralph Sampson and Julius Erving because he says he likes the way they play. Well, others like the way Quentin plays, and one is Harlem Globetrotter Harold Hubbard.
He has a lot of talent because he's agile, he's quick, and then he's determined. So it makes a big difference as long as you know if you're determined and you really want to work hard to do something. So I think he's going to be a great ball player within the next couple of years or so.
No one knows what kind of basketball talent Quentin Higgins will develop into, and of course no one knows how much more he might grow. But rest assured there will be many a basketball coach keeping their eyes on Bay Minette and the rise to the top of Quentin Higgins. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Montgomery police were in the right place in the South Court Street area at the right time, around 2:24 a.m. when the call came in. They received a detailed description of a suspect who had broken into a home in the area and attempted to rape a woman. Police spotted someone who fit the description perfectly.
Officer Ingram got out of the car, confronted the suspect, identified himself, and I might note that Officer Ingram was in a full police uniform. He identified himself and asked the suspect to raise his hands in the air and come in his direction. The suspect then turned and dropped a pair of gloves he had in his hand and ran towards the west side of Lanier High School. Officer Ingram fired one shot with a shotgun and striking the suspect in the lower right leg, causing a minor flesh wound.
Officers say the teenager is a suspect in a rash of burglaries and rapes that have occurred in the area during the past several months.
Police say the teenager apparently broke into 3 other places the same night. He's believed to be the same suspect who's broken into homes in the Carter Hill Road, Court and College Streets, and Fairview Avenue areas. Police say the juvenile has confessed to 12 of those break-ins reported in the past several months. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The Senate seemed somewhat subdued today compared to what was called a chaotic shouting match that ended last night's debate on the comparative negligence bill. An anticipated fight over a dog racing proposal for Macon County didn't materialize when the special order calendar bypassed consideration of that bill. Senators did pass a bill increasing the registration fee on motor freight carriers from $1 to $5, and another that authorizes the retirement systems to set up a life insurance program for teachers and state employees. The Rules Committee proposed another special order calendar that would force the Senate to take up the prevailing wage bill and continue with that legislation until it's either passed or defeated. If passed into law, the prevailing wage bill would set up a commission to set construction wages for state projects. Opponents say that this would increase state construction costs by 40%. Larry Dixon of Montgomery says the sudden appearance of the bill caught him unprepared.
This will be another marathon debate. We are not going to give up the floor once this bill becomes the order of business until it is taken away from us again. And if that means 2 days, if that means 3 days, I don't know how long it will take, but we will be here until that decision is made.
But Senator Dixon will have to wait until next Tuesday to begin his filibuster. Once the bill was called up, the Senate promptly adjourned. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
There is always a leaning to the low bidder who meets specifications for any purchase coming from this campus. We make every attempt to stretch our dollars just as far as they will go. We have too few of them, and you can be assured that the tendency is, not a tendency, we do award to the low bidder who meets specifications. The opinion is that they have a pretty constant.
Today's graduation exercises literally marked an end to a 10-week uphill march for the 27 recruits.
Left, right, left. Put your helmet on too, McBride.
All this training, this 10 weeks of training has got to pay off now. Pay attention to what you're doing and listen to me in there, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's saddle up.
Marching became part of the fire department's training with the beginning of this year's recruit class. Marching is not designed for physical conditioning as much as it's a tool for mental discipline.
They should learn that we don't have time to sit down and explain each order on the fire ground, and we need for them to respond instantly to it.
Mental discipline is a large portion of a firefighter's job. After all, it's not human nature for a person to rush into a burning building.
It takes a while to get used to it, even if we have a practice burning. They'll still need to gain the experience on the fire line. It's, like I say, it's not something natural. It's something that you really have to work at unless you're one of the rare individuals that just likes that kind of action.
I think you did real good. I think you did real good. You see how fast you used your pack up in there? Excitement, excitement. That's why they say it's from 20 to 30 minutes on the physical exertion, depending on the user. See, mine hadn't went off yet, see?
Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer says new methods of training, like marching, are just part of the reason the city has the best fire department in America. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
And then they let us now get 2 weeks apart, but the same story, how tough it is and how hard he's working. Now 3 weeks, as soon as something gets going, everybody wants to form a committee. So the bulls that was already there got them, and there was absolutely no need for a new bull down under the tree. And
this time, for a response to the mayor's beautiful Selma, Alabama.
Thank you, and
to the widows and orphans of the veterans, that we've got an obligation to see. Alone. They'll let us alone. You know, it's a simple analogy that those of us who keep up.
Liftoff of Delta 160 and the West Star.
Man has been launching commercial communication satellites for almost 20 years now.
Liftoff of STS-7.
And the Challenger went up last week. It carried with it Indonesian and Canadian satellites, which it sent gracefully spinning into space on its second day of flight. Though that may seem far removed from our workaday world, we're much more involved with satellites these days than you might realize. A growing number of businesses, from hotel chains to communications companies, are turning an ear to space. The television industry has been relying on satellites for years, but now more and more satellites and all the technology surrounding them are coming closer to home. It was just 3.5 years ago that the FCC opened up the home satellite station market, and even then the cheapest one could set up a satellite receiving station was about $6,000 to $10,000. But now that's changed. Prices have dropped and home satellite dishes are springing up everywhere.
Right now, less than $2,000. Very easily can get in there less than $2,000. This is compared to, say, 3 years ago when you're talking about $6,000 or $7,000.
The technology of satellite receiving dishes is changing rapidly. There are now 19 satellites sending television signals to North America, enough to provide at least 50 different programs at once for home viewers. One guess puts the number of home satellite receiving stations in this country at 120,000, enough to suggest that what was once a curiosity is now a part of our daily lives. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Mr. President, Mr. President, the Rules Committee is going to have a supplementary calendar once we finish this short calendar, and we're going to consider some other bills, and I would move to lay a substitute on the table. Mr. President, I'd like to get to that. Legislation countries that would create 10 Tom Robertson. I don't think you're going to gain anything by filibuster. About 5,000 jobs for Alabama citizens. And Mr. President, to attempt to amend or substitute the special art calendar that has it on there. Certainly, Mr. President, I am opposed to the adoption of a Rules Committee report. Excuse me. You want us to discuss the other bills at length before we ever get to S-139?
29. 29. Number 48. 48. 445. 50. 50. Bingo, huh?
Montgomery Attorney Julian McPhillips told Judge Hobbs that the court-ordered election is actually a postponement of the 1982 general election. He further claimed that the governor doesn't intend to call the election in time for the party to have a primary. Attorneys for the state Democratic Party and the governor, however, say the suit should be dismissed because the court doesn't have jurisdiction over the matter of party operations. But Judge Hobbs made his opinion clear several times. He says that if the Democratic Party nominates candidates for the general election without approval of the Justice Department, the entire elections might be invalidated and still more elections called for. Judge Hobbs pointed to the Civil Rights Act that requires Justice Department approval before election methods are changed. The judge said, quote, "I don't want to have that baby put on the doorstep of the federal court 2 or 3 months from now because the party doesn't hold a primary," end quote. While the judge didn't make a decision on whether or not he has jurisdiction, he did urge both sides to settle the question before another hearing is set on the matter.
I did not interpret what Judge Hobbs said to be his requiring the primary elections be held. I think that he gave a personal opinion.
I understand what the judge says, and of course what he said will be communicated to the party. The issue here, though, is whether the State Democratic Executive Committee, the governing body of the party, is going to make the decision itself or is going to be told to do so.
I agree with Judge Hobbs. In fact, the Voting Rights Act requires that any process by which a state committee would handpick the legislature would have to be approved in advance, and there's been no such plan submitted. We've got state statutory deadlines breathing down our back. In fact, by July the 7th, if we don't have nominations open by then, we very well may have the whole process voided. So
no word on when Judge Hobbs will make his ruling. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the federal courthouse.
And that is one of the requirements stated in their requirements for affiliation. And we have, in the past, not been able to attain that funding level through other small ventures, so that the amounts that we have raised would
salary that we would get by doing
over 90% of the urban leagues throughout the country are funded by United Way, and so that the Metropolitan Montgomery Urban League is a rare instance of not having received any funding from the United Way organization. So we will continue to work cooperatively with the United Way to try to change that fact. $75,000, and that is one of the requirements stated in their requirements for affiliation. Although not explicit, will have the support of the National Urban League in theory, and in fact, the National Urban League has issued a statement.
That person, the type of salary that we would get by doing this will give us.
Of course, one of the goals of the Urban League, and our goal also has been the providing of training to youth to prepare them for jobs in the future and to bring them up to adequate standards of education. And we presented a proposal to the Montgomery City Council, which was not funded, to provide that kind of training. So that is one of the avenues that we have been looking at, and we'll continue to present proposals in that area.
The unofficial touchdown time in mission elapsed time 6 days.
Welcome home.
Thank you very much, sir.
And now this is the second time. You know, I was going to meet you in Florida, but then you decided to land in California. But again, you didn't stop and pick me up off the South Lawn like I asked you to.
I'm guilty, sir.
If you're looking to buy tickets for the '84 Olympics, this is the place to come, Montgomery Sears. And if you're planning on going to LA, you best beware. Have a large bank account. Ticket applications have been available since June 14th at Sears stores across the country. Everything you need to know is contained in this 28-page brochure put out by the Olympic Committee. A quick thumb through this brochure reveals some interesting facts. The most prevalent is the price of the different Olympic events. They ain't cheap. For instance, if you just want to make the opening and closing ceremonies, it'll cost you $200 for each event. And that's one of the cheaper activities. Olympic basketball, a season ticket for all games, will run you $2,000. If you're a boxing fan, plan to shell out $2,200 for a season ticket. Swimming will run you $1,500, track and field $950. But take heart, some events are reasonable. The modern pentathlon and shooting are only $50 apiece. And yes, there is something free of charge, yachting. Despite the high ticket prices, sales are reported brisk across the country and here in Montgomery.
We've had a good interest. We had good interest the first day, something under 40 people, and we're having around 10 to 15 a day now. Pretty steady.
Is this expected?
This is about what we expected, yes.
Ticket applications will be taken at Sears stores through August the 15th, but the sooner you have your application in, the better off you'll be. Because after August 1st, the lottery system will be dropped, and all remaining tickets, if any, will be filled on a first-in, first-filled basis. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Lieutenant Albert Hardy divides his time, his life, between two worlds, the police department with its own mores and language, and the housing projects, where police sirens are all too familiar background noise. The lieutenant seems most comfortable with a troop of kids around him, yet he's always aware that the children look at him differently because he wears a uniform and a gun.
I find it tough because you get stereotypes of saying that all police are out to shoot us, out to beat us, they don't mean us any good. These are things that I'm only one person. I have to always let them know that I'm one individual and I do the best that I can.
As head of the Community Relations Bureau, it's Lieutenant Hardy's job to explain the police department to the people in the projects, and the projects to the department. It's a job for a translator, or a mediator in his words, and it seems it isn't getting any easier.
That misunderstanding, that breakdown in communication has gotten wired, I would say. That's why we are doing everything that we can to closen it in some way or another, which is this PACE program, I think, does a beautiful job at that.
Letters PACE stand for Police in Your Community. It's an organization started by the Community Relations Bureau of the Montgomery Police Department.
What's really important to Lieutenant Hardy is what's happening in this meeting room every Thursday afternoon. The lieutenant says this is where the youngsters get to talk and ask questions. This is where he gets to repeat his favorite message.
You can't have freedom without responsibility. Nothing comes free.
And it is in these weekly PACE meetings and the informal talks that spill over that Lieutenant Hardy places so much faith.
I think the kids are listening. I'm saying that I think they're beginning to know that police know us for themselves rather than someone telling them about us.
Lieutenant Hardy is fiercely loyal to both of his worlds. He simply wishes the two were closer together. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
This is the largest statewide VFW meeting in Alabama history. More than 650 people are in Montgomery, representing 36,000 VFW and auxiliary members in the state. The convention gives members their yearly chance to talk over issues facing vets, like unemployment and national defense. The VFW has traditionally been a strong supporter of the military.
We know that the only way that this country can ever survive is through strength. Through strength, and that's what we believe in so much, that through strength we can survive.
But VFW officials also recognize that their group needs strength to survive, and nonpartisan political involvement is now a part of that survival.
VFW is the only organization that organized a group, a PAC, Political Action Committee. Some of the other veteran organizations come away from that, said, no, you're going to ruin your membership. We've had 28. This is our 28th year in the ladies' auxiliary and the men of growth. And so we're growing. And the other organizations that has condemned us about it are not growing.
The VFW's political muscle may show up best in next year's elections. With nearly 2 million members nationwide, they expect to attract the attention of many candidates. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Zoo Day had been in the planning since last December, and today the big day finally arrived.
Well, the church decided that they wanted to reach out to people outside the church to show them the love. And we're just trying to let these people who have handicaps know that we love them. And this is a special Zoo Day for them.
And people with physical handicaps, unless they're just in great shape, they don't really have anything to do. Of course, they're in good shape. They got the wheelchair sports and this kind of stuff, but there's not a whole lot of them that are. You take people with CP, and they don't have the ability to get out and compete like me, for instance. I'm a paraplegic, but and this gives them an opportunity to get out in the world, see the animals, have a good time, and be with people that love them. It's a great thing.
In addition to feeding crackers to goats and petting a boa constrictor, everyone also received a special greeting from Ronald McDonald.
Right here, okay? Hi! McDonald. Hi, Angie. How you doing, darling? Hi! Can you give me a big smile? Aw, that's sweet.
And after a few flips and a few tosses of bread to the monkeys, it was time to go home. But not without a memento of the day so that it can be remembered for days to come.
Good shot. Thank you, boys.
Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
The Braves scored early, and they never let up. In the first against Charlie Puelo, this is Dale Murphy breaking out of a slump and lashing a double that's off the wall in left center. Brett Butler will score to put Atlanta up 1-0. Bob Horner, coming off an ankle injury, follows with his 16th home run of the year. It's a 3-run shot, scoring Ramirez and Murph in front of him. 4-zip Braves after a half inning. In the third, they added 2 more. The first comes here as Jerry Royster sends a shot to deep right. Chris Chambliss, the runner on second, comes all the way in to score on the triple. That made it 5-0. Royster later scored on a sacrifice. The 2 Cincinnati runs came in separate innings on solo home runs off Pete Falcone. Alan Nicely connects here in the 5th to make it 6-1. In the 7th, this is Ron Oster sending one over the left field fence, but by then, it was much too little too late. Falcone fires a 5-hitter and strikes out 10, including Mike Oseski here to win the game. 8-2, Atlanta wins it to make it 3 straight over the Reds. In Game 1, Glenn Hubbard provided all the offensive heroics in the 4th as he unloads this 2-run homer. Over the fence and left, it gave the Braves and Craig McMurtry a 3-0 lead. McMurtry went on to fire a 3-hitter as Atlanta held on for a 3-0 win. Game 2 was all Braves until the 9th. Ironically, the game winner was this Randy Johnson single in the 4th. That scored Glenn Hubbard from third with the game's first run. Biff Pocoroba had a great night. In the 5th, he delivers this line drive single to left. Rafael Ramirez and Dale Murphy will cross, giving the Braves a 4-0 lead. In a 5-run 9th, Poco also provided this bases-loaded shot to left center. It'll go as a 2-run double, and Atlanta led it 10-0 going into the bottom of the 9th inning. But Ken Daly couldn't hold the shutout. Johnny Bench broke it up with this long home run to deep left. It's a 2-run shot, cutting the lead to 10-2. 3 batters later, Ed Nicely rips this double that a diving Brett Butler can't get to. As the ball rolls toward the wall, 2 runners will score, and it's 10-4. Steve Bedrosian then came on and gave up a run-scoring single and a walk to load the bases. And with the tying run on deck, finally gets Dave Concepcion to ground to short here, ending the Reds' rally. The Braves sweep the twin bill 3-0 and 10-5. Bottom of the second, Pirates up 1-0. Here's Willie McGee getting an equalizer, homering off Don Robinson to deep right. That tied the game at 1. Top of the third, Johnny Ray gets what proves to be the game-winning hit off Kevin Hagan. With this single to right, that scores Marvell Wynn. Ray will go to second on the throw and later scored. 3-1 Pirates after 3. Robinson helped his own cause in the fourth, singling to right here with 2 men on. Dave Parker and Dale Barrow come around to score 5-1 Bucks. It was 6-3 going to the top of the 7th when Jason Thompson unloads this solo shot to deep right center off Jim Cott. Later in the inning, Dale Barrow sends this 2-run blast to the seats, and that put it out of reach at 9-3. Pittsburgh wins their 7th straight, 10-3 over the slumping Cardinals, who have now lost 5 in a row.
Low 30.
And he wins with his service as he dominated the match throughout. A lesson in power tennis from
Tuition at Auburn University is too high, and it's going up again in January. I cannot believe it. It shouldn't. That's life, though, you know?
No, I think it's very reasonable. I attended another school in Malibu, California last year, and it was $12,000 for a semester this year. I mean, for a year. Here, it's only approximately $3,600. It's very reasonable.
Start my first quarter at Auburn, and having a lot of fun up here, and boy, there's a lot of cute guys up here. Having a lot of fun, and that's just about it.
I like Alabama. That's all I can say. I'm just not from around here. It's a nice place.
I think teachers need to get paid more money.
Why?
I'm a teacher.
What do you do that makes you worth more?
Go to college 5 years, and then they don't even pay you anything. And then they want to know why their kids don't get educated.
Going home and painting my bedroom is on my mind. I just got a new house, and I got a lot to paint. And getting home before it rains. That's it.
A boyfriend?
Why?
Because I'm up here for the summer and he's home.
I just hope I pass this quarter, you know. Make some good grades. I came, I saw, I conquered.
No, nothing, not school. Nothing. Just playing.
If I had anything on my mind, I wouldn't be here getting an education.
Classes.
The Red Cross normally sees a slight drop in blood donations every summer. But this year, Red Cross officials say fear of contracting AIDS is keeping people away from blood collection centers and significantly lowering the blood supply.
People are quite concerned that they're going to get AIDS from donating blood. And you don't get AIDS from donating blood. You get AIDS from getting blood.
There's been so much publicity about this disease that people are, of course, curious. They want to know how it's affecting them and their family.
Alabama is not experiencing the problem nearly as much as some other parts of the country. The Red Cross says blood supplies here have so far barely been hurt at all. Still, Red Cross officials are requiring all donors to read an information card about AIDS and other diseases before giving blood.
We're going to be confident that the people in our area are not going to quit donating because of the AIDS. We're trying to educate them about the problem, and so we try to just keep them aware of what is going on and that we are concerned, and we're trying to help in any way that we can and to improve the situation.
Though the Red Cross insists you can't get AIDS from giving blood, the whole AIDS scare has put the Red Cross in something of a dilemma. They're trying to keep people informed about AIDS so they won't be afraid to donate. At the same time, they're being more careful than usual about who they accept blood from. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
We have dreams too, as Father Purcell did. We like to hang on to some of our children who get to an age where we cannot take care of them because of our license and because of their size, because they're difficult to handle. We like to extend our facility and hang on to our children and perhaps keep them until the Lord calls them and takes them to heaven.
I'm real happy. I think it's so big that it's just really hard to explain. I think it's a gradual thing that you finally accept it over a period of time. Actually, I don't think I'll really believe it until I talk to them over the phone.
Jane Drake knows well what the Vashenko family has been going through since 1978 when they entered the embassy. She's been in constant contact with the family by phone and by letters. She says their visit to the American embassy to find out about immigration was only to last an hour, but instead turned into a 5-year nightmare.
The Soviet soldiers would not allow them to enter. When they tried to break through the Soviet guards, they were attacked, and John Vaschenko, who was only 15 years old, was brutally beaten, taken away, and tortured for 9 days. And it was then and only then that they decided they had to stay inside the embassy in order to protect their lives and the lives of their family members that they had left back in Chernogorsk.
The Vashenkos will be leaving the Soviet Union to join another family member, Lida, who immigrated to Israel earlier this year. Mrs. Drake says she has no idea why the Soviets are allowing the family to leave now. While Mrs. Drake's struggle to seek freedom for the Vashenkos may be over, her quest for the departure of another Christian family continues.
Timothy and his mother were the ones that were in the embassy, but they had a family back home also, so there are about 10 or 11 Chimakahalovs. And we've always worked for them also. It's just that our organization was named for the Vaschenkos.
Today's reception was just the icing on the cake for the 6 members of the Larry McCord family after their whirlwind week in Washington. It was the family's first trip to Washington, and for all but Mrs. McCord, it was everybody's first trip on an airplane. After arriving in Washington, the family met First Lady Nancy Reagan, who is the honorary chairperson of the American Family Society, which presented the McCords and 8 other families with their awards. Then Wednesday, they appeared on the Today Show with weatherman Willard Scott.
Family Awards. These are the McCords, and you're Larry McCord, right?
That's right.
And where are you all from?
Slap Out, Alabama.
You're from where?
Slap Out, Alabama.
Slap Out?
Yes, sir. Slap Out.
The McCords received their award because of their strong family relationship and their devotion to their community. Larry is a farmer and chief of the Hopeville Slap Out Volunteer Fire Department. His 21-year-old daughter was the first woman to serve in the department. The entire family works on the farm in Slap Out, where they grow feed for their dairy cattle. The children have all participated in livestock shows, and the family always helps with the county fair. Many people in Elmore County are grateful to the McCords for their community efforts and are proud of their hometown heroes.
Oh, I think it's a great honor, most especially for themselves as well as Elmore County, as all of Alabama, in fact. The Elmore County Extension Service to be congratulated, Mr. Edwards, with the home demonstration for so many people involved in it. It's just a tremendous thing for Elmore County and the McCord family.
Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
In providing those things to you, the citizens. And the first, of course, inventory our existing program effort of this. We have never had an unbalanced budget. Every budget that we've had has been balanced. We have lived within our revenues. Now, I need not tell you about the cruel hoax of proration. When folks will budget more money for their departments to use or to improve or fund for capital projects when there is not that amount of money coming in. It just simply creates a proration problem. There are good things happening in Montgomery that are moving us forward.
In these age brackets.
We also have representatives from Mr. Glaze.
To keep kids in school who otherwise would not be able to stay in school.
Given a chance to go to work, that the people they're working for will do, or what will be the consequences if they do not follow.
We feel that we've made progress each summer,
and the fact that in the beginning we had only work experience jobs, and we feel that the quality of those particular jobs has improved. We've been able each year to relate the type of job that the young person, the young CETA participant was assigned to, more closely relate those to their career goals.
Not the New Jobs Act, no.
Okay.
The CETA Act, of course, always was. It's just a different name. It's still the CETA money. The money for the new Job Training Partnership Act will be available.
Making laws isn't cheap. The Alabama legislature has spent more than $4 million during this fiscal year, and now it's asking for another $1 million, saying it needs that to keep the doors open. The drain on the legislative pocketbook started with a series of special sessions earlier this year and has continued into the regular session that's now underway. Governor Wallace called the legislature into session in January to deal with a severe shortage of money in the general fund, a problem lawmakers addressed by passing the oil and gas severance tax. Then the governor called the members back into session in February to consider an increase in unemployment compensation taxes. And in April, the legislature came into its regular annual session. Another drain on the legislative bank account has been reapportionment, the now lengthy effort to redraw House and Senate district lines. Before the year is out, the legislature is expected to pay out nearly $400,000 in legislative committee member expenses, attorneys' fees, and professional costs, all related to reapportionment. As of today, the legislature has about $250,000 in its account, about enough money to keep the legislative doors open another 10 days. Tomorrow, the House will be in a position to extend that time by considering Senate Bill 484, which gives the legislature another $1 million out of the already prorated general fund, part of which is needed to pay for an increase in salaries for full-time House and Senate employees. Full-time committee clerks and legislative aides were given step increases, bumping their salaries 2 to 5%. And because of the 5% bump in salaries for House Clerk John Pemberton and Senate Secretary McDowell Lee, each now makes $77,679 a year. That keeps them among the highest paid state employees, making nearly $28,000 a year more than Governor Wallace is paid to be the state's chief executive officer. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
A course of 20 students, we can probably get by with a course director, course coordinator, instructor to be director. It's going to take us a while to have very many physicians who are instructors, but we do it all the time as much as I'd love to. And I've had 1,000 volunteers to go help out in Florida.
I think lies on except maybe the splint. Fitness her head back. Actually applying the splint.
Okay, well they're applying the splint now, so if we're in a situation right now, where would we be?
You're ready to transport. Yeah, you can ready to transport. You got a patient packed, stabilized, ready to transport.
You got bleeding stop. Right. You're treating the shock. You're splitting the fracture, which makes you into the secondary survey. Right. What injuries does she have?
She got abdominal bleeding. She's got fractured left femur. She's got head injuries.
Advise the government to let people go to where they can be useful. We wouldn't have any advice to give to the people who want
This is Donnie Sims. He's quite an accomplished athlete, as you can see by the way he climbs to the top of the gym where he works out. But what makes his accomplishments even more remarkable, Donnie is a paraplegic. He's confined to a wheelchair, if you can call this confinement.
Once you can do that, don't need me anymore.
Donnie is the instructor for a unique program that's now being offered at the Montgomery Therapeutic Center, which in itself is unique in its facilities. It's one of only 4 centers of its kind in the country. Donnie's course is designed to help people of all ages who are confined to wheelchairs to become more independent and to literally overcome architectural barriers they face every day.
When I ended up in a wheelchair, I didn't have anybody to teach me these things. So I ended up having to learn most of them on my own. And I decided then that it was time that somebody did this. And that is the whole reason we're here. And thank goodness for this center, we've got the opportunity to do it, and the obstacles are available now.
And the things Donnie teaches his pupils are downright amazing.
Way forward. Way forward. You're looking good. Good shot.
The Independence courses are available to all ages. So if you need more information, you can contact the Montgomery Therapeutic Center on Augusta Street. It's a unique opportunity. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.